For over a century, if you saw an American soldier holding a pistol, a machine gun, or an automatic rifle, chances are you were looking at the mind of one man. He designed weapons so reliable they fired 40,000 rounds without jamming. He built guns so deadly they influenced 2 world wars. He was the most prolific firearms inventor in human history. And it all started in a dusty gun shop in the Utah frontier with a 13-year-old boy and a pile of scrap metal. John Moses Browning was not born into privilege. He was the son of a Mormon pioneer, Jonathan Browning, a self-taught gunsmith who had fled religious persecution in Illinois and crossed the Rocky Mountains with Brigham Young. Jonathan's faith and skill as a gunsmith shaped his family's destiny. Polygamy was common in the Mormon community at the time, and Jonathan had 3 wives and fathered 22 children. Among them, John Moses would emerge as the brightest spark, destined to change the face of warfare. John Moses was born on January 23, 1855, in Ogden, Utah, a remote settlement nestled against the rugged Wasatch Mountains. From a young age, he was fascinated by machinery and the mechanics of firearms. He spent hours dismantling and reassembling guns in his father's workshop, experimenting with design, precision, and function. His inventive mind quickly outpaced his peers, earning him both admiration and skepticism from experienced gunsmiths who doubted a boy could truly innovate. Before we continue into the challenges and breakthroughs that would define his career, take a moment to subscribe for more untold stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Browning's journey from a curious boy in the Utah frontier to the mastermind behind history's deadliest weapons is a story of persistence, genius, and relentless innovation, one that would shape modern warfare forever. By the time John Moses Browning reached his teenage years, it was clear that he was no ordinary boy. Surrounded by the tools and inventions of his father's workshop, he began experimenting with firearms in ways that were unconventional, even audacious. While other boys his age played outside or tended to chores, Browning spent hours studying mechanical drawings, tinkering with springs, triggers, and barrels. He would disassemble guns down to the smallest pin, only to rebuild them with subtle improvements that made them safer, faster, or more reliable. Despite his talent, Browning faced constant skepticism. Local gunsmiths and even some members of his family questioned whether a boy could truly innovate. It will never work, they would say as John presented designs that seemed impossible to execute. He was often laughed at, yet he persisted, driven by a vision few could understand. This early period in Utah laid the groundwork for a lifetime of invention. Each failure taught him lessons about metallurgy, timing, and mechanics, shaping a methodical mind that would later revolutionize the battlefield. By age 20, Browning had already submitted patents for several firearm designs. Some were immediately dismissed by manufacturers as impractical or dangerous, but others showed glimpses of brilliance. He understood balance, ergonomics, and recoil management in ways that seemed ahead of his time. Military officials often mocked his ideas. They preferred conventional designs, believing the old ways were sufficient for the battlefield. Yet Browning's persistence meant that he continued testing, refining, and improving his concepts, sometimes using scrap materials or household tools to perfect mechanisms that others deemed impossible. In 1879, Browning unveiled his first major invention, a lever-action shotgun that combined reliability with ease of use. Critics initially ridiculed it, claiming no soldier or hunter would ever trust such a design. But when the first prototypes fired flawlessly under rigorous testing, the doubters began to pay attention. This small victory was a turning point, showing Browning that innovation often required enduring ridicule before achieving recognition. As his reputation grew, Browning began corresponding with firearms manufacturers, sharing prototypes and ideas. Companies in the East and overseas were initially wary. The idea of collaborating with a young man from a frontier town seemed risky. Yet Browning's designs kept proving themselves under testing conditions. Military leaders might have doubted the practicality of his creations, but the results spoke louder than skepticism. Browning's unique ability to combine mechanical precision with battlefield practicality started earning him invitations to design more advanced weapons, including semi-automatic and automatic models that would later define modern warfare. Before we dive deeper into how Browning's designs changed combat forever, take a moment to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Stories like this show how relentless creativity and perseverance can turn mockery into legacy. By the mid-1880s, Browning's life was a balancing act of family, faith, and invention. He married, had children, and continued refining firearms designs while keeping an eye on military applications. Every new patent was a challenge, pushing the limits of contemporary engineering. And while the world may have laughed at some of his early designs, Browning was quietly reshaping the future, one ingenious mechanism at a time. The stage was now set for John Moses Browning to step onto a global platform. From a boy tinkering in a Utah workshop to a designer whose creations would arm soldiers across continents, the journey was only beginning. His relentless drive, coupled with an unerring instinct for mechanical perfection, was about to produce some of the most iconic and deadly firearms in human history, weapons that would eventually dominate battlefields in 2 world wars and countless conflicts to follow. By the 1890s, John Moses Browning's reputation as a firearms innovator was growing far beyond the small town of Ogden, Utah. His early successes with lever-action shotguns and rifles had earned him attention from Eastern manufacturers, and eventually, major firearms companies in Europe. Despite his youth, Browning's designs were being tested and sometimes adopted by militaries, yet skepticism persisted. Military officers and rival gunsmiths often mocked his unconventional approaches, doubting that a single inventor could create weapons capable of withstanding the chaos of battle. Browning, however, was undeterred. He had an innate understanding of mechanics, recoil management, and ergonomics that few could match. He meticulously studied the needs of soldiers, hunters, and law enforcement officers, striving to create weapons that were not only reliable but also intuitive to use. Each design was the product of careful calculation, repeated testing, and a willingness to challenge traditional wisdom. He understood that a soldier's life could depend on the precision of a single mechanism. In 1897, Browning introduced the first of his semi-automatic pistol designs. The concept was revolutionary, a firearm that could reload itself without requiring the user to manually cycle the action. Military officials were skeptical. "It's too complicated," they said. "It will jam in the field. No soldier will trust it." Browning, as always, relied on testing and results rather than opinion. He built prototypes, iterated tirelessly, and eventually created a design that functioned reliably under harsh conditions. This first glimpse of his genius would pave the way for the M1911, a pistol that would become legendary in U.S. military history. At the same time, Browning's work on automatic rifles and machine guns began to gain momentum. His early experiments with gas-operated and recoil-operated mechanisms were often dismissed as impractical or over-engineered. Yet Browning's meticulous approach ensured that each design underwent rigorous testing, surviving conditions that would render other weapons useless. Soldiers testing his early machine guns quickly realized the potential. These were not just firearms, they were tools that could alter the outcome of battles. It wasn't only functionality that set Browning's weapons apart, it was also their durability and reliability. While other firearms of the era might fail after a few thousand rounds, Browning's designs could fire tens of thousands without jamming. This reliability became a hallmark of his work and earned him grudging respect from the military officials, who once mocked him. Before we move on to see how Browning's inventions began to dominate battlefields worldwide, take a moment to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. These stories remind us that persistence and innovation often triumph over doubt and ridicule. By the late 1890s, Browning had established a pattern that would define his career: design, test, iterate, and endure criticism. Each prototype, each failure, and each success brought him closer to creating weapons that were not only revolutionary but also transformative in warfare. His work would ultimately provide soldiers with tools that were far more effective, reliable, and deadly than anything previously available, setting the stage for innovations that would change the world in the decades to come. The combination of technical genius, relentless experimentation, and an unshakable belief in his designs made John Moses Browning more than an inventor. He was becoming a legend, a man whose weapons would later dominate both world wars, defy skeptics, and forever alter the landscape of military history. As the 20th century dawned, John Moses Browning's innovations began to transform the battlefield. His work on semi-automatic pistols, shotguns, and rifles had already caught the attention of both the U.S. military and European powers. Yet despite growing recognition, Browning continued to face skepticism. Many officials dismissed his designs as impractical, overly complex, or unnecessary. Some even mocked him for daring to challenge conventional weapon-making traditions. But Browning's genius lay in his ability to ignore doubt and focus on results. By 1903, Browning had perfected a new design that would become one of his most famous achievements, the M1911 pistol. This semi-automatic sidearm combined reliability, stopping power, and ergonomic design in ways that had never been seen before. Military testers who had initially doubted its potential were astounded when the pistol fired thousands of rounds without jamming or malfunctioning. Even skeptics had to admit that Browning's creation was revolutionary. The M1911 would go on to become a standard issue for U.S. forces for decades, serving in both World Wars, Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. Meanwhile, Browning's experiments with automatic weapons were breaking new ground. He studied the principles of gas operation, recoil management, and rate of fire to develop machine guns capable of sustained, reliable performance. His designs addressed a critical need: weapons that could maintain firepower under battlefield conditions, without frequent maintenance or failure. Early machine guns often jammed or broke under the stress of combat, but Browning's prototypes consistently demonstrated unparalleled durability. Soldiers testing them quickly realized the potential to change engagements by providing continuous fire where previously it had been impossible. Browning's vision wasn't limited to individual firearms. He foresaw the tactical impact that reliable automatic weapons could have on modern warfare. His designs influenced strategies, unit formations, and battlefield tactics, giving commanders more flexibility and firepower. In Europe and America, his creations were quietly reshaping how armies thought about combat, long before the full-scale global conflicts of the world wars erupted. Before we continue into the next chapter of Browning's story, take a moment to subscribe for more untold World War II stories and comment where you're watching from. These moments remind us that ingenuity, persistence, and a willingness to challenge the status quo can change history. By the 1910s, Browning had become a force in both U.S. and European arms development. He was collaborating with manufacturers across continents, refining his designs and producing weapons that combined elegance, simplicity, and lethal effectiveness. Each new model was the culmination of years of testing, failures, and iterations, a testament to Browning's belief that perfection could be approached if not achieved. Through all this, Browning remained grounded, dedicated to the principles he had learned in his father's workshop: precision, durability, and practicality. The ridicule and doubt of others no longer mattered. History would soon show that John Moses Browning's weapons were more than tools. They were transformative instruments of warfare, capable of reshaping battlefields and defining the outcomes of global conflict. This relentless pursuit of innovation set the stage for the next phase of Browning's career, where his designs would move from prototypes and tests to deployment in the deadliest conflicts the world had ever seen. The skeptics' laughter would fade as the battlefield proved the genius of his creations beyond any doubt. By the early 1910s, John Moses Browning had earned a reputation as the most inventive firearms designer of his generation. His M1911 pistol was on the verge of adoption, and his work on semi-automatic rifles and shotguns had drawn attention from militaries and law enforcement worldwide. Yet, despite these successes, Browning faced persistent doubt and ridicule from traditionalists. Critics scoffed at his ideas for automatic weapons, insisting they were unnecessary, too complicated, or simply too dangerous for soldiers to rely upon. Browning, however, remained undeterred. He understood that innovation often required endurance, and that true breakthroughs rarely came without resistance. During this period, Browning turned his focus to machine guns, a weapon that would prove transformative in modern warfare. Early machine guns were prone to jamming, overheating, and breaking under the stress of sustained fire. Browning's approach was methodical. He studied the mechanics of each component, simplified complex processes, and incorporated new recoil and gas operation techniques to ensure consistent performance. Prototype after prototype underwent rigorous testing. Even when failures occurred, Browning meticulously analyzed each malfunction and used it to refine his designs. The result was the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, and the M1917 and M1919 machine guns, each engineered for reliability, durability, and ease of operation in the harshest combat conditions. These weapons were designed to withstand thousands of rounds without failure, giving soldiers an unprecedented advantage on the battlefield. Despite early skepticism, field tests proved their effectiveness. Infantry and artillery units could now rely on continuous firepower without the constant interruptions that had plagued older weapons. Browning's innovations were not only mechanical, they reshaped military strategy. Commanders began to rethink battlefield formations, tactics, and logistics. With reliable automatic weapons, small units could hold positions against numerically superior forces. Firepower became a decisive factor in both offensive and defensive operations. His designs allowed for faster, more flexible responses and changed the very nature of infantry combat. Before we continue into the critical period when Browning's weapons dominated two world wars, take a moment to subscribe for more untold World War II stories and comment below where you're watching from. These stories remind us that persistence, vision, and technical genius can defy ridicule and leave a lasting impact. By the outbreak of World War I, Browning's designs were beginning to see widespread adoption. European armies and the U.S. military quickly recognized the reliability and superiority of his firearms. The mockery and doubt that had followed him throughout his early career began to fade as results spoke louder than words. His weapons were now being tested in combat, and soldiers were witnessing firsthand the devastating effectiveness of his innovations. John Moses Browning's persistence, vision, and genius transformed the weapons of war. What had once been considered impractical or laughable became indispensable on the battlefield. The stage was set for his designs to shape the most significant conflicts of the 20th century, and the world would soon understand why he was regarded as the deadliest, most inventive mind in firearms history. His journey from the dusty workshop in Utah to the global stage was far from over, but every success brought him closer to redefining warfare forever. By the 1920s and 1930s, John Moses Browning had become a towering figure in firearms design, and yet his work was far from finished. While the M1911 pistol, Browning automatic rifle, bar, and his machine guns had already proven their worth, Browning was constantly pushing boundaries. He sought to refine existing designs and create new weapons that could deliver greater firepower, improved reliability, and unmatched durability. Even in the face of widespread skepticism, he refused to compromise on quality or innovation. Browning's genius lay not only in his ability to invent, but in his relentless focus on battlefield practicality. He understood that soldiers needed weapons that could function in the harshest conditions: mud, snow, rain, and extreme heat. Every prototype was tested rigorously under field conditions, often firing tens of thousands of rounds without maintenance. His designs were engineered to function flawlessly when other weapons failed. Military officials who had once dismissed his ideas began to realize the extraordinary utility of his inventions. During this period, Browning continued, developing automatic and semi-automatic weapons, many of which would later define World War II. He worked closely with manufacturers in the United States and Belgium, including the legendary Fabrique Nationale, FN, in Liège. Collaborations with FN led to innovations like the Browning high-power pistol, which combined high-capacity magazines with reliability and precision. European militaries began to take notice, and Browning's designs began crossing oceans, influencing armies around the world. Despite his increasing fame, Browning remained intensely private and modest. He avoided public acclaim and focused solely on the work itself. Letters between Browning and military officials reveal his methodical approach. He would review every complaint, analyze every failure, and refine each mechanism until it exceeded expectations. He had learned early in his career that criticism, whether from military officials, rival designers, or the public, was inevitable, but results would ultimately earn respect. Before we continue to see how Browning's weapons would dominate the battlefields of World War II, take a moment to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. These stories remind us that dedication and innovation often outlast doubt and ridicule. By the late 1930s, Browning had perfected designs that would become iconic. His machine guns, including the M2 50 caliber heavy machine gun, combined devastating power with extraordinary reliability. The bar had evolved into a weapon capable of sustained fire in combat, and his semi-automatic pistols were setting new standards for sidearms worldwide. These innovations were no longer experimental. They were becoming indispensable to armies preparing for the coming global conflict. Browning's influence was both technical and strategic. His designs allowed armies to rethink tactics, improve firepower distribution, and increase mobility. Soldiers could now rely on weapons that would perform under the most extreme conditions, reducing risk and increasing effectiveness. By the time World War II erupted, Browning's creations were ready to face the ultimate test. From a curious boy in a Utah workshop to a world-renowned firearms designer, Browning's journey was defined by innovation, persistence, and the courage to challenge conventional wisdom. Every design he created, every prototype he tested, and every skeptical voice he overcame set the stage for weapons that would change the course of history. And soon, the world would witness just how deadly and revolutionary John Moses Browning's inventions truly were. As World War II engulfed the globe, John Moses Browning's weapons had become essential to the Allied war effort. From the jungles of the Pacific to the frozen forests of Europe, His firearms were in the hands of soldiers, shaping the outcome of countless battles. Yet the irony remained that many of the weapons that would prove legendary were once met with skepticism, ridicule, and outright dismissal. Military officials had doubted their practicality. Engineers had criticized their complexity, and some had even called them dangerous. Browning, however, had always trusted testing, results, and his own expertise above the opinions of others. By the early 1940s, the M1911 pistol was standard issue for American forces. Reliable, accurate, and robust, it had already been battle-tested in World War I, but now it was proving indispensable on a global scale. Soldiers marveled at its ability to function flawlessly in mud, sand, and water, delivering precision when it mattered most. Similarly, the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, allowed infantry units to maintain suppressive fire, giving smaller groups of soldiers a fighting chance against numerically superior enemy forces. What had once been mocked as experimental and impractical had become a battlefield necessity. Browning's machine guns, particularly the M1919 and the 50 caliber M2 heavy machine gun, were transforming military tactics. Units equipped with these weapons could dominate defensive positions and provide critical fire support during offensive operations. Enemy forces soon learned to fear the distinctive sound of Browning's weapons, which could cut through armor, fortifications, and entrenched positions with devastating effect. The battlefield was no longer the same. These weapons gave soldiers an unprecedented advantage. It wasn't just the mechanics of the guns that made them revolutionary, it was their impact on strategy. Commanders could deploy smaller, more mobile units with confidence, knowing that Browning's firearms could hold the line, suppress enemy advances, and change the tide of engagement. The designer's meticulous attention to detail, every spring, every bolt, every chamber, had created tools of war that were unmatched in reliability and lethality. Before we continue into the pivotal battles where Browning's creations would define history, take a moment to subscribe for more untold World War II stories and comment where you're watching from. It's incredible to see how innovation born from persistence can leave such a lasting impact. By 1942, Browning's legacy was firmly established, yet the full measure of his influence was just beginning to reveal itself. Allied forces equipped with his weapons were better prepared, more lethal, and more confident in combat than their enemies. Despite facing mockery and doubt earlier in his career, Browning's vision and perseverance had ensured that his inventions would become the backbone of modern military firepower. Across battlefields worldwide, soldiers wielded his designs with a mix of awe and respect. The same man who had been dismissed as a dreamer in a small Utah workshop had created firearms that would dominate the most brutal conflicts of the 20th century. Browning's story was a testament to the power of persistence, ingenuity, and unyielding faith in one's own vision. A story that would resonate long after the guns fell silent and the war ended. By the height of World War II, John Moses Browning's weapons had become synonymous with reliability, power, and innovation. From the North African deserts to the European front lines, his designs were trusted by soldiers under the most grueling conditions. Yet, the journey to global recognition had not been easy. Early in his career, his ideas had been dismissed as impractical, his designs mocked as overly complicated. Those who had doubted him were now forced to confront the undeniable truth. Browning's firearms were game changers. Among his most influential creations were the M2, 50 caliber heavy machine gun, and the Browning automatic rifle, BAR. The M2, nicknamed Ma Deuce, combined incredible firepower with unmatched durability. It could cut through enemy vehicles, fortifications, and aircraft with a level of precision and consistency that was unheard of in the era. In the hands of Allied soldiers, the M2 became an unstoppable force on land, sea, and even mounted on aircraft. Likewise, the BAR provided infantry units with a mobile, reliable source of automatic fire, giving small squads the ability to hold positions or advance against superior enemy numbers. Browning's innovations were not limited to sheer firepower. His designs emphasized ergonomics, efficiency, and adaptability. Soldiers appreciated how intuitively his weapons functioned. The mechanisms were simple enough to operate under stress, yet sophisticated enough to withstand prolonged combat. Ammunition feeding, recoil management, and durability were all optimized to reduce the chances of malfunction in the heat of battle. Every weapon carried his signature blend of precision engineering and practical battlefield understanding. It wasn't just the battlefield performance that set Browning apart, it was the strategic impact. Military planners now relied on his weapons to execute new tactics and operational strategies. With dependable firearms in their hands, soldiers could maneuver more boldly, concentrate firepower effectively, and hold critical positions even against overwhelming odds. Browning had not only created tools for war, he had reshaped how battles were fought. Before moving on to the stories of specific engagements that showcased Browning's genius in combat, take a moment to subscribe for more untold World War II stories and comment where you're watching from. It's a reminder of how one man's vision can change the course of history. By 1943 and 1944, Browning's influence extended across multiple theaters of war. The M1919 and M1917 machine guns were standard issue in infantry, artillery, and armored units. Soldiers in the Pacific marveled at how well the bar performed in jungle warfare, while troops in Europe relied on the 50 caliber M2 to suppress fortified positions in armed vehicles. Even the smallest design details, from trigger mechanisms to stock design, had been carefully crafted for maximum effectiveness in real-world conditions. The once-mocked inventor had achieved something extraordinary. A boy from a Utah frontier workshop, who had spent hours tinkering with scraps of metal and rejected designs, had produced weapons that became the backbone of Allied firepower. Browning's combination of technical brilliance, relentless testing, and battlefield insight ensured that his weapons were not just effective, they were legendary. As the world moved toward the final stages of World War II, Browning's designs continued to define engagements, turning the tide of countless battles. What had begun as a series of daring experiments in a small shop had become a legacy that would shape modern warfare for generations. Soldiers and commanders alike would remember his contributions, and the history books would record his name as one of the most influential figures in the evolution of military firepower. As World War II reached its peak, the battlefield impact of John Moses Browning's weapons became undeniable. Soldiers on every front relied on his creations to survive and succeed. From the frozen Ardennes forests to the islands of the Pacific, Browning's designs provided unmatched reliability and firepower. Weapons that were once dismissed as impractical or overly ambitious had become essential tools of war. The Browning automatic rifle, BAR, proved invaluable in both offensive and defensive operations. Small squads equipped with the BAR could hold strategic positions against larger enemy forces, suppressing attacks and providing mobile firepower where it was most needed. Its reliability in harsh conditions, rain, mud, and extreme temperatures, meant soldiers could trust it when their lives depended on it. Similarly, the M1919 and M1917 machine guns offered sustained fire capabilities that reshaped infantry tactics. Soldiers could now concentrate their fire with precision and confidence, forcing enemy forces to adapt or retreat. Perhaps the most iconic of Browning's creations, the M2, 50 caliber heavy machine gun, became a symbol of Allied firepower. Mounted on vehicles, aircraft, and naval vessels, the M2 could penetrate armor, destroy fortifications, and provide suppressive fire across vast distances. Its effectiveness changed how commanders planned assaults and defensive operations alike. Entire battalions began relying on Browning's weapons not only for combat, but as a psychological advantage. Their mere presence instilled fear and caution in enemy ranks. Browning's work also had a profound influence on military strategy. With dependable automatic weapons, armies could execute tactics that were previously impossible. Infantry units could maneuver more aggressively. Mechanized divisions could coordinate more effectively, and artillery could integrate fire support without fear of friendly weapon malfunction. Commanders understood that the success of operations increasingly depended on the reliability and effectiveness of Browning's designs. Before moving to the final chapter of Browning's life and legacy, take a moment to subscribe for more untold World War II stories and comment below where you're watching from. Stories like this highlight how one individual's vision can shape the outcomes of wars and the course of history. By the end of the war, Browning's weapons had been deployed across every theater from Europe to Asia and had seen action in nearly every major engagement. Soldiers praised their performance, and generals recognized the strategic advantage they offered. Browning's early critics, those who had mocked his unconventional designs, were silenced by results. The weapons they had doubted were now legendary, changing not only the way battles were fought but also the expectations of military engineering. John Moses Browning's contributions extended beyond mere mechanics. He had redefined reliability, durability, and efficiency in firearms design, proving that a single innovator could influence the strategies and outcomes of global warfare. His inventions saved lives, provided soldiers with confidence, and ultimately altered the trajectory of modern combat. The story of Browning is more than the tale of an inventor. It is a testament to perseverance, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. From a young boy tinkering in a Utah workshop to the creator of the deadliest weapons in history, Browning's journey left an indelible mark on the world. His legacy continues to inspire engineers, soldiers, and innovators, proving that true genius often emerges from vision, determination, and the courage to defy convention. By the end of World War II, John Moses Browning's weapons had become legendary. What was once dismissed as impractical, overly complicated, or impossible had become the backbone of Allied firepower. Soldiers carried his pistols, rifles, and machine guns into every theater of war, relying on their unmatched reliability, precision, and durability. Browning's creations had saved countless lives, altered battlefield tactics, and changed the very nature of modern warfare. Browning himself remained humble despite global recognition. He never sought fame or fortune. His focus had always been the perfection of his designs. From a boy experimenting in his father's Utah workshop to a designer whose inventions influenced 2 world wars, his journey was a testament to ingenuity, persistence, and vision. The skepticism, mockery, and doubt he had faced early in life only underscored the brilliance of his accomplishments. The impact of Browning's work extended beyond the battlefield. His firearms set new standards for reliability and engineering excellence, influencing designs for decades to come. Militaries around the world studied and adopted his innovations, ensuring that his legacy would endure long after the guns fell silent. Before we close, take a moment to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Stories like Browning's remind us that determination and creativity can overcome doubt, leaving a mark on history that lasts for generations. John Moses Browning had not only changed the way wars were fought, but had also proven the power of vision, precision, and relentless innovation. From a 13-year-old tinkering with scrap metal to the most prolific firearms inventor in history, his story is one of brilliance, perseverance, and the enduring influence of a single mind capable of reshaping the world. His weapons would continue to define combat and inspire inventors long after the battles had ended.